Okay, welcome back to the second video blog from Vision Farming. We had our farm team meeting pre-calving, sort of planning out some of the stuff we're doing, so maybe this is a little bit of a rehash of some of our discussions from this morning, some of the challenges we face on both of our dairy farms and how we're managing them. We've done a lot of preparation as much as we can, and there's a lot of hard work going on by the farm team at the moment getting ready for calving. It's fast approaching, like many farms. So we had a discussion this morning around, particularly the big focus was energy management, understanding our cows are going through this biggest challenge in their lactation cycle, where milk colostrum production and milk production begin as huge energy demand for the cow, and then you have dry matter intake not being able to match that level of output. So there's always that period of negative energy in the cow where intakes and outputs aren't matched, and you want to close that gap, keep it as thin as possible, because that energy deficit and that challenge at lactation is why transition management is key. Sets up your cow for the whole lactation. So we looked at both herds, body condition score has been managed, going well on one farm. It's probably silage quality has been poor on both farms. Hopefully that will be the last year, that will be a challenge, but silage quality is an issue around feed value and protein. So we're looking at what we can do. We've been monitoring body condition. I think we've a couple of 10 cows. I've done some just cow side simple ketometer BHB tests. Started them this week on some of the thinner cows, and they're actually okay. So I think we've taken a lot of action around feeding here to supplement cows, and we're looking at soybean and rolled oats going in at the moment for two reasons. The rumen itself, we're not feeding the cow transition, we're feeding these bugs in the rumen. We want to get the cow ready for post-calving when she's going on to concentrates, and to really work. And as well, because our crude protein is quite low in our silage, we want to supplement the cow here in the risk period to improve colostrum quality. Seen it used at a lot of farms with good effects. So we're doing that on both farms. We're going to track our BHB bloods throughout as well to see how we're going. And so I think we're pretty much on track around energy, focusing again on feed space, management of groups, particular focus on our freshly calved cows. We've had issues with water quality on one farm, which has been really interesting to see. Water intakes were a problem indoors. We put in more troughs. Water looked okay, but when we actually went and measured oxygen levels in the water, they were very low. When we cultured, we picked up some bugs. So we've got some unique solutions, I think, to that challenge. But at the moment, one of the jobs today is cleaning out those water troughs again, and making sure we don't have issues around water with our freshly calved cows. So look, that's where we are on energy. Big one I see every dairy farm in Ireland. This is a huge challenge: milk fever and low blood calcium. And we typically associate milk fever issues with your cow down, and that can be a big part of it. But that's just a tip of the iceberg. For every one cow that's down, there's 10 cows in the herd with low blood calcium, which can affect dry matter intake, it can affect immunity, it can affect cows getting dirty after calving, because all these like your rumen, your uterus, they're all big muscles, weak. Blood calcium plays a key role in muscle function and immunity. And new research looking at energy and calcium and immunity being linked together. So what do we do when this is such a big challenge? And I've looked at probably 30 silage analysis from different farms around the country in the last 3 months, and I'm typically seeing these high risk, what I call milk fever silages. So we did silage analysis on our farm. Now, from a feed value perspective, the silages weren't wonderful, but from a milk fever perspective, they weren't a huge risk. So what we needed to look at was, we had 3 silage analysis from our 3 different cuts of silage on either farm. We looked at our target being about 10 kilos of dry matter intake, 0.4% of that being magnesium, which works out about 40 grams as your kind of standard recommended pre-calving dose. And why that's important is, when the cow comes up to calving time, she obviously, when she starts producing colostrum, particularly milk, huge demand for calcium. That calcium demand can come from her diet. So what she does through a metabolic process is flush calcium from the bone into her bloodstream. And there's a couple of very important macro minerals involved in that process. So if we give cows a lot of calcium pre-calving, what actually happens is we can slow down this metabolic process where she drives calcium from her bone. So we actually want low blood calcium. The second thing that's very important to this is magnesium plays an important role, flushing out that calcium. In our Irish systems, what we're seeing is issues because of another mineral or element called potassium. Potassium will lock up magnesium in the rumen, will not allow that flushing process. So most of the silages I look at are over 2% potassium, and slurries application is one of the reasons why we see such high potassium. And there's probably an argument in the future for actually making dry cow specific silage. So what we've done is we've looked at our potassium levels in our silage, our magnesium levels and our calcium levels, and we've worked out based on we have a good standard dry cow mineral that we actually should be covered in that. Now that's one of the, I'd say I've looked at 25 or 30 of these, and most farms going in at that feeding rate from the silages I've seen won't actually work, because magnesium is probably too low, calcium is actually too high, and potassium is really high. So it's very farm specific. But milk fever is a challenge I think we're actually ready for. What we will do is we'll look at urine pHs and in cows coming up to calving time. And I still think that fourth lactation plus cows will have to receive some sort of calcium supplementation. Be it we're going with two options, calcium bolus, or we're going with a fresh calver product, which is a liquid drink which contains calcium and energy. So that's our management. We've looked at our silage analysis, we've looked at where we are, our minerals are going to hit us, and we're going to look at our fourth lactation animals. So what we did this morning in our meeting was really focus in on, we had a good chat, and this is all pretty standard stuff I know for people, is we had a look at our individual cow treatments and management of our transition cows, understanding the risk that this is a key time of year. We've got to focus heavily on our transition management, and the cow, because there are such energy demands, calving itself is such a metabolic stress. There's the physical aspect of calving, and there's the change of environment, particularly when it comes to heifers. So we have a lot of focus gone in on heifers, getting them into the parlour, getting them used to milking, the milking machine, feeding them in the parlour, just putting a wabbing pipe up between the udders just to get them used to that stimulation. And we'll put an external teat sealer on them next week as well, and we have them actually spraying their teeth. So we're getting the heifers ready for calving as well. So it's a massive challenge. So how we manage the individual critical care. There's a reason we see so much of our clinical and infectious diseases in around calving time. It's because of that negative energy, that immunosuppression. So what can we do? What are we monitoring? We're looking very closely at milk fever levels, we're looking at displaced abomasums, we're looking at mastitis levels, particularly E. coli mastitis. It's hard to figure out this now from my drawing this morning, but when I see a lot of clinical mastitis, I look at three areas. A lot of bugs or bacteria or infection pressure. One of these three areas is broken down, or all three. Something affecting that mechanical gait, teat function, or number three, immunity at other level. And that's why we see a lot of clinical mastitis at this period, particularly more severe E. coli mastitis. So two of the big drivers I always see with E. coli mastitis this time of year is we will say look at energy, immunity, and calcium will be big drivers here. But also we need to look at infection pressure. So when cows are indoors, we'll be pre-dipping and post-dipping, and certainly move to post-dipping when cows are out, but pre-dipping an essential part of it. We've really seen a reduction in our clinical mastitis on certainly on one farm, if not both, and we're adapting that. So there are some of the things we're focusing on now. We've got our cell count nicely under control on our second farm. We really want to make sure, with so many heifers calving in as well this year, we want to make sure that those heifers calve in and we keep that. We've made fantastic progress. We've a lot of work to do with the other farm because we actually had cell count under control. It spiked again pre-drying off. So we've a lot of work done with dry cow therapy, and we're going to really focus heavily on knowing our problem cows, CMT testing them, making sure that we're following up, and I suppose we're doing other stuff, we're checking bugs to see what we're culturing mastitis. But the key focus is on that critical area. So this morning we had a good discussion with the team around individual cow therapy. What are we doing with sick cows? So one of the things that I have certainly learned, that not just in Ireland but from travelling around the world, is supportive treatment. Oral fluid therapy for cows is just something that every farm should be doing. So I think every farm should actually have a stomach tube. I think we've seen how oral fluid rehydration therapy has transformed human medicine. We see it in our calves with scour, and a lot of farmers will be using a stomach tube on farm regularly for supportive care. So both farms have a stomach tube. What we're doing this morning is drawing out our protocols again for our freshly calved cow that's at a hard calving, and for our fourth lactation plus cow. What are we doing there? When are we using our fresh calver, 20 litre solution, drawing out those protocols, having them on farm so we know. And as well, when we know that this is a risk period for infections and we will get them, the like of E. coli mastitis, that we make sure that we get in early with an anti-inflammatory, and we treat them aggressively with oral fluids to support them, because we often focus on antibiotics, and they will play a role, of course, in treatments, but we often focus on antibiotics. We forget that cow that's sick is reduced feed intake, reduced water intake, she needs supportive care as well as everything else, because her own immune system and her own rumen health is so important to getting better. When we just typically go in with antibiotics on their own, particularly with different infections, we forget about that supportive treatment that the cow requires. So we have a big focus on that. We'll probably talk about more on farm over the spring if we get a chance about the different routines that we're using. So that was it, that was our focus, having a plan, measuring some of these stuff as we go along. A lot of work done by the team, challenges around space, I've said it in the last blog. We're very much, you know, a farm that needs to improve performance. Our targets around, some of the big targets, I suppose this is coming, a lot of coming from me maybe, is massive reduction in antibiotics by at least 50%. Improved overall herd performance as well. But really, this is a make or break time on both farms around calving and transition management, because negative energy here, prolonged negative energy here will have impact on cows coming back, cycling, fertility, and how they start off their lactation cycle is so important. So that's it, that's a bit of an update. Blog number 2, focus on critical care. Just to say that in next week we'll be actually launching our video training series on oral fluid therapy, and also on the Vision Farming shop. We have a lot of the products that we'll be using on the farm ourselves, like the stomach tube, like the rehydration therapies that we're using on cows. And already we're seeing from, you know, starting implementing a lot of this, just I suppose when the project started, the difference that makes supportive treatment around how cows perform and respond to different treatments. So that's it. Bit of a whirlwind tour of our transition management, kind of broad, but there'll be lots more to come from us. Happy safe farming.